Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hello, and welcome to everyone, I guess, to today's Lunch and Learn from the HR Florida State Council's InsideHR Summer Series, where we pull back the curtain on an HR discipline and explore the various career opportunities available in the world of HR, as well as give you the chance to share your voice by asking our esteemed panel any sort of questions that you're looking to have answered. So I see the comments coming in. Welcome. Some people from Boca, from Inglewood, from Miami, lots of Dade County representation I'm seeing so far here. So welcome, everyone. I am Georgette Cartagena, and I'm your Emerging Professionals Director on the State Council, which means that my role is to create opportunities for the council and local chapters to support those who are new to our field with under 3 years of experience. And I will let my co-host, Kayla, share a little bit about herself.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Kayla Duckworth, and I am the College Relations Director here at HR Florida. My role on the council is to support the various student chapters throughout the state, assist student memberships with current trends and topics in human resources with networking opportunities, and I also run the student game competition, which takes place at our leadership conference and is scheduled to take place this year on October 26th in Charlotte Harbor. So if anyone is interested in learning more about that, you can reach out to me directly after this event. And right now we are live streaming. So a little bit of housekeeping. We are live streaming. So if you can hear us okay, give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already answered our first audience question, what is your role? And share us where you are joining from. I'm going to hop over to the comments section and take a look. I see a lot of responses coming in, which is great. I invite you all to share any questions you have about today's topic, the HR business partner, throughout the conversation. I'll keep monitoring the comments throughout and I'll answer where I can. Now we have panelist introductions.
Yep. So we have a pretty amazing lineup today. As you can see, these are, but I will say these are the abridged version of their bios. So because I didn't want to give it all away just by introducing the panelists. So in this conversation, I'm excited to welcome Jane Myers. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but Jane is actually the HR Florida State Council Treasurer. So whoop, whoop. And she was HR Professional of the Year in 2021 and has been a volunteer with SHRM for over 10 years. As a regional HR business partner, she could not have been more perfect to join our panel. So if you're logging in from the Treasure Coast, make sure you show her some love in the comments here. Next, joining us is Jess Holloman. Jessica is the chapter president for Suncoast HR. She's also an HR Tampa member and a Veterans at Work ambassador with the SHRM Foundation. So in her work, she serves as the Vice President of Corporate Enablement and HR Business Partner, giving her a really unique perspective that I'm excited to hear more about today. So welcome. And our next panelist, our last panelist, is Zoraida Perez. Zoraida has held many senior HR leadership positions throughout her tenure, and currently she serves as a manager of HR policy and compliance at her day job, and shares the same spirit of service that honestly all of our panelists have, as she is the VP of Professional Development for the Suncoast HR chapter. So shout out to Suncoast, who has a lot of really knowledgeable and experienced professionals there. Looking to help out the next generation of professionals. So Kayla, why don't you introduce the topic?
So welcome panelists and all attendees. We are so excited to have you all here today. Today's topic is, what is an HR business partner? While the specific responsibilities of an HR business partner likely existed before, the term itself is credited to Dave Ehrlich in the 1990s. His book, Human Resource Champions, published in 1997, is widely recognized as introducing the concept of the HRBP as a strategic partner within organizations. Dave Ehrlich's definition of an HRBP focuses on them acting as a bridge between the HR department and the business. Here's a breakdown of some of the key aspects. Strategic partner, focus on value creation, expertise in multiple areas. Ehrlich's model outlines 4 key areas of expertise for HRBPs, which is human capital, developing and managing the talent, leadership, which is fostering strong leadership throughout the organization, organization effectiveness, which is optimizing organizational structures and processes, and change management, which is leading and facilitating change initiatives. In essence, Ehrlich defines HRBPs as strategic collaborators who leverage HR practices to drive business success and employee well-being. Panelists and audience members, how many of you relate to that definition?
So much. I'm sure all of our panelists are just excited to share. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off with our first question. So this question is for each of the panelists. And then whoever wants to go first, just kind of like raise your hand, hop off mute. Let's go first, and then we'll go from there. But first question is, what initially drew you to this sort of HR business partner career path, and how has your experience evolved since then?
Okay, I guess I'll go first. So for me, I think the HRBP role kind of spoke to me because it was more a consultative type role that you kind of can grow into. You kind of start off in your HR role as being, from a beginning entry level from a transactional or and then move into tactical. But this is kind of where you can go that step further and be more of that business strategic leadership partner. And again, I kind of think of more being a consultant type role. And that's kind of where it drew, that's what drew that role to me. And that's kind of what I see it as. And I think that's kind of where it's, starting to evolve more so now, from a strategic level. So, and I see us moving, at least continue to move and evolve towards that, versus a lot of the transactional or tactical things that we tend to see HR being.
I love that. Jess, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I actually I say I fell into HR because HR was not, believe it or not, didn't want to go to college to do HR or any of that. It was interior design. So but I will say I started in HR really as like benefits and payroll, right? And then quickly started to learn the recruiting side and multiple facets. And I think what has kept me in the HR business partner realm is exactly what Janine said, right? It's more of the consultant. Really, I feel in this role, I can make an impact on the business, right? While also being that employee advocate, right? Because that's a tight line that we walk as an HRBP, right? And so as that advocate, sometimes I have to be their voice, right? When we're implementing things from the HRBP perspective. And Janine nailed it. I think a few years ago, HRBP was still very tactical, like was still in the, in the weeds. And I will tell you, I still have to get in the weeds, but really aligning, right, your HR business, like your goals and what that looks like to the business. Is again how it's kind of evolved from the strategy perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Zoraida.
Thank you. Yeah, so I also fell into HR many, many years ago. I actually started my professional life as a biologist and chemist, but I did do a master's in human resources and management. So after many years, what I have learned, and really, I think this has been the flavor of the underlying current through my entire career, is not just the strategy, but the ability to influence the business from within. So it's almost like you get underneath things and all of a sudden push the change, make the change happen, because I think that the most important piece of any organization, is the people. But a lot of the leaders that we have, and you know this very well, are technical professionals. They know how to do their job, and they got into these roles because they were so great at their job. But who teaches the leader how to be a leader, right? And who influences their behavior, their responses, and things like that from really the sidelines, right? So they're like, I always use this analogy. You're in the football game, right? You see the teams going and playing and everything, but how do the coaches really help make those professionals score? By influencing them, influencing their behavior, teaching them. And so I think that's the most important part of my job, and whatever moniker or title we may use. The influencer piece is the one that really carries us through our career. So that would be my answer.
Thank you. I love the slightly different takes, but they're all kind of interrelated, right? So the things that stood out to me was that it was a more consultative approach, impact on the business, that level of influence and sort of advocacy that is available to the team in order to support us. Now, I see a really good question in the comments, so hopefully my panelists don't mind us already going off script here. But the question that was proposed by Mark Stewart was, how do you effectively separate HRBP and HR generalist / manager roles? How do you kind of differentiate the BP compared to the generalist manager?
I would say for me, the HR business partner, I feel is like is the spoke, I guess, if you will, like the hub of the organization, right? Where like sometimes generalists are very focused in their domain, right? Like And so as an HR business partner, I have to be that hub for the business where I have to reach out to benefits or compensation. Well, if you're at a larger organization like me, I should say, I'm not a team of one. So in some places that's you, but for me, it's been leveraging like learning and development and all those things, all the other parts of HR that have to come together to move the business forward. And I feel like that's my job in that space, is moving things out of the way for the business or getting them what they need. I'm not sure if I defined that very well, but I feel like when I was in generalist roles, it was very specific focuses, if that makes sense.
I think it also depends on the organization, right? So different organizations define their roles a little bit differently. As a generalist, and I would say that a generalist is, how to say, that individual that knows a little bit about everything, but is not necessarily 100% focused on one piece. That's why some of us may run, maybe as Jess mentioned, an HR of one, right? We do benefits, compensation, ER, the whole 9 yards, right? We run with that ball. Depending on the organization, that it's almost like a number line, right? You move a little bit closer to 10 or to 9, depending on what the needs of that audience is. Is there really a need to differentiate between one and the other? Well, the HRBP is the individual that is ingrained and understands the actual business unit need. It's in there, speaking with the managers, understanding their temperature, understanding their influences, understanding their own challenges. The generalists and the managers are those that are more COE or Center of Excellence focused, right? And to follow on Jess's comment, yeah, the HRBP is that individual, that middle person, right? That goes between the two sides. That's why it's so important to have a very good and skilled HRBP whenever there is that model, because they're the ones that are actually influencing the business in accordance to what the COE that they're working with is communicating, right? If it's comp, if it's because they want to offer somebody else a salary beyond, the band, and they have to red circle them or whatever it is, right? So is there a need to actually do that? Right? So the HRBP is the one that is going onto the business and saying, do we really need this? And they're the ones that come to the COE, because COEs, we are not inside the business. And that's by design. We cannot align 100% with the business because they are supposed to do the ops piece. We are supposed to look at the compliance and all those other pieces that keep the organization straight in front and center, right? But we cannot speak what the business language is. That's what the HRBP does. Hopefully that helped.
So I agree totally with both of you guys too. I think, again, it goes back to the relationships. Is partnering with those stakeholders or your business unit partners. And I can kind of speak for myself from being, from a regional standpoint, is partnering with each one of those office leaders within each of those offices that I support. And we're talking about, what's going on for them, what are their challenges. And again, going back to what was said earlier, is knowing the business, and it's, how do they make money? Who are your competitors? Understanding the business acumen. And then also, once you understand that, you're also speaking their language, not HR language, but their language. So you can translate those business goals that they have for their units or for the company and push those down to from a strategic or HR strategic goals. And then that's where, your HR generalists and your managers come into place in order to kind of initiate those or launch those initiatives that you're setting out for the HR department or your regional team or what have you. But again, I think the separation comes from you are pretty much that partner, either that coach, that guide for those leaders in order to help navigate them and provide the direction that they need.
I love it. So as a former business partner myself, I resonate with all of the things that the panelists are kind of sharing. And I love the undercurrent too. Something that I want to highlight from some of the responses that was shared is a little bit of, there's an element of change management that the HR business partners are sort of in a more unique position compared to like a generalist or manager who are looking at the organization as a whole. They're looking at their business entity and able to leverage that sort of insider knowledge and relationships to help those initiatives move forward. So great questions here coming in. I think, Kayla, you've got the next question.
Perfect. What are the top 3 skills you believe are essential for success as an HRBP? And this is for all the panelists.
I think for me, I go back to the relationship, establishing those relationships with your key stakeholders to me is, one of the top 3. And again, knowing the business. And then going back to an earlier comment, your influence, how your influence is on that business, and then speaking their language. So those to me, I think, are the top 3, going back to, establishing the relationships, knowing the business, and then influencing the business in order to help solve the problems that they need.
I would agree. I think business acumen for me, top and foremost, right? You can't be effective if you don't understand the business. And for me, also courage, right? So sometimes we have to push back and it's not comfortable, right? But being not afraid to be that person to, to take a risk or to, hey, let's try this, or here's what I'm hearing. And I think the other one for me is like, I call it this never ending sense of curiosity, right? Always wanting to understand more. And I'm cautious with that because sometimes like that curiosity is like the why. So I say curiosity sprinkled with a little bit of empathy, right? To understand that somebody may have put that process in place that you're now questioning, right? So more of help me understand why we do this, why was this put in place, those types of things. So for me, like business acumen, courage, and curiosity are paramount for me.
For me, I agree with those. I would say that my top would be communication, the quality of communication, ability to not just listen to what is going on, but understand what is being said and be able to communicate. Without that communication piece, you cannot influence, right? You don't have great communication skills, the quality of your influence goes down, right? It's eroded. So communication, influence, ability to influence, that listening. And to that, I would complement with, not just knowing the what, but the so what, right? Because I think that is part of the pieces. That's one of the things I have told my staff, that's the what, but then so what? How does that translate to me? And sometimes they'll look at me like, what do you mean? And I'm like, yeah, I know, but translate it to them, right? So, and that's part that all revolves around the communication piece, because without that, you cannot influence a leader who is trying to meet margin, trying to meet the expectations of a client, who they're trying to get that budget, in place so that eventually, all of that magic will translate to end of year bonuses, right? For everybody involved, because that's the reality. That's part of understanding the business, to what the other panelists were saying here. But not just the what, but the so what, being able to communicate it and influence it.
Yeah, and I just like to add to that too, just, with that what and so what, because the so what matters to the business, and that's what we should be solving for. Is that why does it matter? It shouldn't matter necessarily that we think we need to implement this change, but it matters to the business on how they are, what they need to get done on a day-to-day basis, or how does it affect their productivity? How does it affect their bottom line? So it's the so what, which is very key. So I like that a lot. How does it affect the business, not what it does to HR? Because we can tend to, put things out there or implement programs that doesn't move the needle at all.
Perfect. So I hear a lot about being able to understand everyone, establishing those relationships, building that communication, and really having business acumen. So I think all of those are really great topics. And then Georgette, you have the next question.
Yes. So I, sorry. So in terms of business partners, how do business partners stay up to date on the latest trends and sort of changes in the field? And I'm going to start with directing this question to Jahane first.
So I think for me, one, I think I call on my peers a lot to bounce things off of. And, of course, SHRM is number one go-to as well, in any other publications that you kind of, seek from an HR perspective. But I think a lot of times it's through my peers that may be going through some of the same situations, who I may kind of, again, bounce some ideas off of. Because, again, you just never know who may be having the same situations or may have been there, done that. And then just it's a nice collaboration, where you can kind of collaborate with a small cohort of different people in different industries, maybe too, and how they deal with things. So I think that's probably my first go-to sometimes. And then of course, again, SHRM is another go-to as well. And then as long in your local chapters as well as our state council.
Yes, lots of resources available there. Are there any other thoughts around how to stay sort of up to date with changes and trends?
No, I would just say your local chapters, which Janine had hit, right? And I'm a member of both chapters, right? HR Tampa, Sun Post, right? And have been for many, many years, because there's differences, right? We split a bridge, but there are differences, SHRM for sure, but any legal and legislative updates too. Like, I feel like I subscribe to a million things, and in full transparency, they like go in a folder and I skim them. But really, it's our legislative, right? Whether that's the HR Florida legislative, or there's two legislative chairs for the local, chapters, where we go through and they give us like, here's the high level of what we need to be concerned about or what's going on. But I would tell you, I subscribe to a million things, and in full transparency, don't read them, but I skim them, right? Like, oh, this is what's the key, the Cliff Notes version, right? So I know what I need to do with that.
So I would agree with what everyone has said, especially with resources that you have available as a professional, as an emerging professional. Especially the chapters, local chapters are very are great pools of not just knowledge, but also the networking. The networking is really what brings that to the next level. You can read a lot of things online. You can attend however many webinars you want. However, attending a local chapter, being a member of a local chapter, is invaluable in my opinion. And I have been a member of HR Tampa and currently Suncoast, and board member at both sides. And the importance of that is pivotal, and the not just the knowledge that you gain from the presentations that are happening, but that networking. One more thing that I would add, and it's something that I'm a firm believer in, is depending on the organization that you're in, educate yourself on what the latest trends for that industry are, and how you can use that, your HR influence, your HR knowledge, to influence that, to contribute, to actively contribute and make your contributions to those who you're trying to lead and help along, to make it um, to make it relevant to them and to learn how to speak their language. So I kind of went a little bit on the side on that, but it's just as important. HR knowledge, we can talk FLSA all we want. We can talk LOA all we want. We can talk ADA all we want. And those things have been around forever. They don't really wiggle that much. It's what is. But the networking within your field is super important, and also the understanding what's going on within your organization and speaking to those professionals. That would be my answer.
And we are going to take a little detour on the order of questions really quick. So I saw the comment come in by Bedford about challenges. So what are some of the biggest challenges you face as an HRBP, and how do you overcome them? And we will start with Jaheen first.
I think probably some of the, or at least one challenge, and I think we all kind of come across this, is how do you continue to stay strategic? How do you continue to not get into the weeds on things when you're tackling a certain issue or a problem? And then also making sure that you have, again, going back to the so what, what are we doing this for? And the reason why. So, because I think sometimes we can, maybe get down into the weeds too much and can take a detour when we should be focused on something else. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, or the biggest challenge that we could face from an HRBP perspective, because again, you can get sucked in to the day-to-day or things that just not, a good value of your time. So that's probably the biggest thing that I see sometimes, is just getting sucked into the day-to-day and you're not focused on the so what piece.
For me, I would say that, sorry.
I was going to invite everyone else to answer too, so you're all good.
Thank you. So for me, I think speaking globally, right, is managing the typical perception within the organization that HR is HR and that they don't know what's going on within the business, especially in a business that is continually changing. For example, in engineering, sometimes, it all depends on, who the client is and what the influences from the government are. And finance is depending on what's going on, the most, up to date, temperature on financial situations, credit unions, whatever it is. I think that the perception of sometimes the business unit on the HR team that we perhaps don't understand, that we perhaps don't see things the way they see it. No, you just don't understand why we need to get this done, right? This has to be done for this moment, for this time, because there's a specific goal, right? There's a specific end. So I think that the biggest challenge, and it's a daily one in many instances, is just making certain the business understands that, listen, we get you. We know what you're talking about. We understand. We're just trying to get you there this way.
I think for me, the biggest challenge that I face is overcoming the status quo and like complacency, right? And I say that because my company is 177 years old. And so sometimes it's and I know you all hear it, well, we've always done it this way. Well, that's great. There may have been a reason why we did it that way. And so I think the example that I often use when I've tried to get somebody to see the process or what they're doing differently was, I call it the sticky note exercise, right? Where there's this process that is crazy, right? And we're circling or we're swirling and we're getting the same result year after year, right? So from a business perspective, I've given them sticky notes and had them plot this process on the wall, right? And then when they look at it and they're drawing all these arrows and they're repeating steps, like they solution themselves after seeing it. And I think, like, for me, I'm a change agent and I'm process improvement. And so sometimes I'm a little persistent. We're going to go with a little, but it's probably a lot of it persistent. In some of these spaces, especially if you're repeating, right? So I can say for me, day to day, that's probably the biggest one, getting people to move out of their comfort zone. And we've always done it this way.
Kayla, I'm just going to chime in here. I think all of these things are so important because think about how much changes and ultimately doesn't change within the world of HR, right? Like these are challenges that I feel are almost evergreen, right? I heard y'all talk about how to stay strategic versus getting stuck in the day-to-day execution. Managing the perception that HR doesn't understand the business, that we are soft in our skills execution and that's it, right? But there's so much more value that we're able to bring as professionals. And then to your point, breaking the mindset of standard operation and, looking at things from a different perspective. All of these are so important challenges that we have to overcome within our roles. But I also want to point out that they are also consistent because of the nature of how different each business is from one to the other. So like we as professionals are always having to learn because of that. And so that leads into sort of my next question, which is, can you share a time or share an example of a time when you partnered with a business leader to achieve a strategic objective? And Jess, since you happen to mention change management and process improvement, I'm going to go ahead and tap you for this one.
Yeah, awesome. So I'll give you a recent example where I collaborated with our business that does our new hire training, right, to really enhance that onboarding process and the training strategy. So we took a look at what was happening. There's a 10-week training course. And then at the end of the training course, we were sending people through a licensing course at the end, right? And that licensing course is a pass or fail, right? And so realizing we were sending people through this training and at the end they weren't passing the licensing course, right? So what did that look at? So we really conducted an analysis over multiple years, right? Tried to figure out what makes the most sense, and really came back with a recommended approach that we do the licensing exam up front. It's a week, right? And they have 3 times to pass that test. And then they go into the classroom training, right? Because the licensing 620 license is totally different, right, than the training. And that has significantly reduced our turnover, right? Reduce the confusion with the new hires of I'm having to learn this class and how New York Life does things, but then I'm having to take this Florida standardized test, which is totally different. So we significantly reduced turnover by taking a look at that. And then just realistically, it was just reordering it, right? And so before the training and the investment, we've also, part of that process was we punched it out 16 weeks. We realized 10 weeks of training also wasn't sufficient, right? So now it's the 16 weeks. And what does that look like? But as you can imagine, that had a lot of people, right? And a lot of hands and a lot of collaboration. But I think ultimately it worked out. And we went into it as, let's try it as a pilot, right? And so that data is what got us to really say, like, see, this is what we did. We started small with this small group, and this is the traction. So I don't know what else to say about that, except for like, yay, it's still working and the pilot process works.
That's what you want, right? Is for, and I love the fact that you use the word pilot too, because I more recently myself have started exploring like, how do we test? Because I'm somebody who likes to put a lot of thought and preparation ahead of time. And so getting things to like an MVP or minimum viable product is sort of a new experience for myself. So yeah, pilot and testing is important. Are there any other examples that our panelists would like to share while they have the floor?
I'll share a small example that we did not so long ago, maybe a couple of years ago now. But one of the things that my team is responsible for is the immigration practice within the organization, right? And so immigration had been done a certain way for a number of years since I joined the organization. Throughout the years, I implemented improvements and things like that, but they were very localized, right? Very housed within HR, done within HR. The leaders were guests to the process, not necessarily being part of it. So most recently, as part of an improvement initiative that we have within the organization, we decided to partner actually with the talent acquisition teams, the HRBP, and some of the business leaders that manage the individuals that are sponsored to come together and formalize the process. So the process, we put together the why, the how, and then we invited the leaders, because it's very transactional. Immigration is a transactional process, right? It's really resides within USCIS. They determine all these things, everything that happens, right? We just help it along and are the inside individuals, right? Managing from within. So what we did is we invited the leaders, the actual managers, to be part of the, and I'm going to borrow that term because we actually use it, the pilot process, right? To go ahead and put them through it, right? 2 leaders with the most individuals that are being sponsored, and really pressure test the process, pressure test how it seemed, how it looked from their side, because we know what it looks from our side. But what does it look like from the leader's side, from the leader that is actually managing that resource that's being sponsored, right? That beneficiary. So that actually to this day, the program is running and has been a success so far. It already left a long time ago, the pilot stage, but it's been very, it was a very fulfilling journey because we learned a lot from that side, right? So it's that's the communication, the influencing on both sides. And we were just perfectly fine being influenced by them, right? Within the parameters and the guidelines that we have to work with. So never underestimate that collaboration, that process, and use a pilot wherever you can, because nobody gets mad at pilot programs.
Yeah, so I'll
Perfect.
share just one little small one, again, kind of piggybacking on the pilot, just scenarios. And I think we're actually going through one right now. And again, it's a small, more so from an L&D perspective, but again, based off of partnering with the local offices that I support and getting a taste of, hey, what do they actually need? And one of the issues that was coming up a lot was, hey, how do we make sure we test or try to figure out or assess some of our candidates before we hire, maybe on those basic skills of Microsoft Office, Excel, Outlook, certain things that, typical things that, we use on a day-to-day basis, but we weren't, once those folks were getting hired, we weren't seeing those skill sets being utilized. So how do we get out in front of it? So that was some of the comments that I was hearing out in the field a lot. So with that, brought that back to one of our Center of Excellence teams, and we kind of came up with, going and and partnering with eSkills to actually, hey, this is something that we can utilize on the front end in order to kind of gauge on, from a hiring perspective. So again, I think it goes back to that partnership and really knowing what the business need versus putting out anything that we think the business should have, but what exactly do they need within their office, and seeing what we can do to help. So again, that was just something small, and we're actually doing a pilot right now. And again, it helps to get, if they're bought into it, it helps on that end for them to actually implement it on their end and get it done. And typically we have no issues with either if there is dollars involved into it. They're usually, happy to pay because again, that's something that's going to benefit their office.
And we are going to take a little detour from the questions again because we had a great comment come in from Oscar. And he said, COVID started halfway through my college years, and so we switched to remote learning for the last 2 years. My talent acquisition internship was remote as well. Now my first HR role out of college is also remote. I've been struggling to break into more of an HR generalist / HRBP role due to a lack of hands-on employee experience / support. What advice would you give for someone in my situation? And this is open to all the panelists.
I think the first step is to your involvement with your local chapter, right? These organizations are still having in-person meetings, right? And I will tell you that from a chapter leadership, we love to see the newbies come in, right? Those that are more junior. Get involved, but not just in attending the meetings. Get involved in a committee. Do something that really showcases your skills, showcases your talents, right? And there's a lot of different roles, and you don't have to be an expert. These are volunteer roles, and I think it's the best way. I will tell you that when I started my HR career, I did fall into it. I started as a volunteer at a hospital. And I got noticed, and then I stepped into a paying job. Now, and not everybody can do that, right? I happened to be in a situation at that time. It was, this is over 30 years ago, believe it or not. And I was able to step into that without any issue, right? And there was no really organizations at my disposal when I was starting off. Nowadays, there is. So look at the organizations. See if you can get involved in a committee. Write an essay or something and send it over to. They have newspaper. They have a newspaper, right? And that's not a newspaper, but Jess, help me out here. We have the
HR
newsletter.
Newsletter. Thank you very much. Why did I just burn out on that? Sorry, guys. See, I told you 30 years ago I started this stuff. So we do have a newsletter that you can submit information. Will it be posted or not? Well, we don't know, but you get your name out there now, and you showcase your knowledge, what you have garnered so far, and you can build from.
Yeah, I think that's a great
Sorry, go ahead.
that's a great idea as far as getting involved in your local chapter. I think that was the first thing that my leader suggested when I first got into the field too, is to get connected with your local chapter. And then, if it's a small chapter, they're easily going to tell you, hey, what do you want to do? So it's very, very easy to get involved, very easy to get sucked in. But once you're there, it's a great experience. I would also say, if there's someone out there that's in the field that you want to get involved in from an HR perspective, tap them on the shoulder and see if that can be an opportunity for mentorship. And I think that's another way of getting to know a different perspective from an HR standpoint, but also that's a great opportunity for networking, because you never know what other opportunities may come out of that relationship that you establish with that mentor.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is it sounds like there was an internship, right? And then currently in an HR role. So I would tell you, if you're currently in the HR role and you're trying to make a different, scope of that, is, do you have an advocate where you're at, right? Because you're already in the HR space, right? Is it your manager? Is it a peer? Is it somebody else that is also your advocate, right? To say, oh, well, this person would be really good for this project, or, cross-functional area. Like we have a lot of cross-functional stuff and geographical stuff, right, in my company. And then truly just having the advocate where you're at will also help with that, in addition to everything that Janine and Zoraida had to say.
I think to that, and that's an excellent point. So your advocate, your mentor, but even further than that, a sponsor. That person within the organization and outside the organization that really represents you when you're not in the room, right? Because that is, and you only earn those as you are displaying, your knowledge, showing your knowledge. So yes, that advocate can be your sponsor when you're not there, because sometimes these decisions happen or these opportunities come up when you're not even in the room.
And I wanted to touch on some things Zoraida said about getting involved with your local chapter. When I got my first HR job, I got immediately involved with my local HR chapter. And the very first thing I did was start volunteering with the hospitality board. That made a huge difference, because the hospitality board checks every single person in that comes into that room. So you're shaking hands, putting a face to a name, meeting everyone in that room. And it was just such a great way to, if you're brand new in a chapter, to get to know people.
So this is actually a perfect lead into my next question here. And I know we are within our last 10 minutes already of our lives. So thank you so much, panelists. I've said it before, but thank you for being here and being willing to share your experiences, your recommendations with us on this call, because I think it's invaluable to be able to hear from different perspectives what are the things that we should be kind of considering or looking at. So and we've sort of entered this conversation already, but for new or transitioning HR professionals, what advice would you give on building a strong foundation for their careers? So I heard y'all talk about the networking, getting involved in your local chapter already. What are some other things that you would suggest? I've also heard business acumen be a thing. How would you suggest somebody start gaining business acumen muscles, maybe if this is totally new for them?
I would say start, within your company. Again, going back to knowing the business, go and job shadow some of the different positions in your company to really know how, one, they do their job. And then, maybe even tag your CFO in order to, get a glimpse of their day-to-day in the financial statements. That can boost up your business acumen tremendously. But I would say, again, go and job shadow, make sure you know what what the employees do there. And then from a financial standpoint, tag that CFO or that financial analyst to help you go through those numbers, so how the business makes money, and where are certain things, how it actually can align to what we're doing from an HR standpoint.
I think that is spot on, because typically HR is not seen as that financial knowledge, but the reality is that we are, right? Especially when we're doing things like, talking about comp and budgeting and things like that, and understanding the inner workings of the business. So to jump off of that, and I think this is true of the entire HR practitioner's career, is do not be satisfied with knowing enough to do your job. Know enough to do the next job, the next level up, right? And so that is something that I think translates to somebody ending an internship and securing a job, or someone that is in a later path of their career. You know, some of us are looking into going out there and presenting into chapters and things like that. And so it's very important to position yourself and look for those opportunities and look for that knowledge of how you can perform that job, that next level job that is, it's very much yours, right? It's your career. Don't be satisfied with just the typical, step ladder of an organization. Look beyond that into what you want your career to be.
That felt like a mic drop. Did it feel like a mic drop to you? Because it did to me.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was so good. I think we're going to have to turn this conversation into a blog post after this, because there's so many good nuggets that are being shared. Jess, I wanted to make sure you had space as well before.
Yeah, I mean, how do I follow that? First of all, but no, I think for sure, and I want to go back to Jaheen, where learn the business, right? The business acumen, and what I would say is, understand the business pain points, right? So you can look externally to, like, what are the trends, right? And be able to kind of, I'm a data person, right? So go look at the data, what's happening out there, industry specific, right? Your local chambers of commerce. We talk about like HR and HR associations, but those local chambers are phenomenal, right? To leverage things that are going on in the community in which you work, right? But also any industry specific associations, right? So that you can take, here's what's happening at my current job, right? So once you understand that, and then going out to say, who else has these problems, and start to bring back some solutions, or at least data, right? Like, we're not in this alone, right? Everybody else is going through it as well, but, or like, this worked, this didn't work, but really just bringing that back.
And just if I can add, just kind of piggyback on Jess's comment about the data. If you are getting data, I think another component of that is the storytelling behind it, making sure you can tell a story with that data and make sure it aligns from the business to whatever HR strategy or key metrics or whatever you're trying to provide or relay back to the business. So I think that's starting to become another competency, if you will, for us to be able to storytell and be able to do that effectively and get our point across with using data.
That is so true. And yeah, data is here, AI is here, right? It's already, technology is constantly affecting the way that we work. And so it's better for us to go ahead and just lean into that and figure out how we can be smarter with our approaches and more effective. And yes, the developing competency of data and storytelling and interpretation is going to be huge over now and the next few years. And I also want to remind y'all that it's when it comes to HR, I think it's really important to be passionate about the work that we do, and make sure that we are excited about what we're doing, right? Because so today specifically, we spoke about the HR business partner function, but there are so many other disciplines inside of HR that are, you've got DEI, learning and development, talent acquisition. We talked about how we partner with several of those on this call. And so I'm excited to have more conversations around what that looks like, but make sure that you're keeping that passion really front and center here. And with our last 2 minutes, Kayla, why don't you close us out?
Okay, so a few things before we close out today. So thank you for all of our panelists for donating your time and sharing your wisdom with us today. Our next Inside HR session will be on August 6th at the same time, noon, on the topic of compensation and benefit roles. To any emerging professionals that are interested in attending the HR Florida annual conference happening at the end of August, we are giving away 3 conference registrations to ease the financial burden of attending. So there is a link to apply for consideration. And we look forward to seeing everyone again in 3 weeks.
Yes, and Ashley and Vanessa, we will respond to your questions directly after we close out the chat. Don't worry, we didn't forget about y'all. Okay, I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.